Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Most Merciful, all praise is due to Allah. And may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Wherever you are, whatever time it may be where you are, we begin by saying Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you and your loved ones, Ya Rabbil Alameen. The elections are over, but we don't know who the president is yet at this point. And if you remember, last week we had our beautiful guest, my beloved brother, Hussam Ayloush, the executive director of CARE California. And we said that this was the biggest and the most active of all the CARE offices there. And Hussam, it is always beautiful to have you with us. And thank you for coming back on again into our program.
Jazakallah khair. Wallahi, it's my pleasure.
Taslam ya Rabbi. And inshallah, also very soon we will be joined by our dear brother, Salam Al-Mariyati, who is the director of Impact, the Muslim Public Affairs Council out of Los Angeles. He's finishing up a class and he will be joining us. So Hussam, last time we spoke about what is at stake. And you explained beautifully about the need for political engagement. Few weeks back, we had Muhammad al-Ibyari. I'm very sure you are very familiar with him. And Ibyari was critical of the Muslim community that there is this idea of once the elections are over, that is when our political involvement is over as well. So the question to you is now, what is next?
Excellent. Wallahi, first of all, Jazakumullah khair for hosting me. It's always a pleasure. And I'm setting up here the Zoom to post it on Facebook. Always a pleasure, wallahi. And the topic is exciting to all of us. It's an era, a new era, a dawn of a new era, I would say. And I'm going to operate on the premise that President Trump is not getting reelected. Of course, you are a nonprofit. We are a nonprofit. We continue to be nonpartisan. But again, we can be nonpartisan, but we can be critical of policies, regardless which party takes them. So the assumption, not because it's our wish or not our wish or necessarily our wish, the assumption is that former Vice President Biden has won the election. It hasn't been announced, but all the indications head in that direction, based on the numbers from Nevada, from obviously earlier in Arizona, and possibly even in Georgia, who knows. But besides that, so I certainly agree with what my dear brother Muhammad said, Muhammad al-Ibyari from Texas, from Dallas. He's right. Political participation is not about voting only. Voting is only one of many steps, and honestly is the least required, least involved of the steps, because it's just an exercise. You do it by mail, you do it in person, 5 minutes. You can't do it and pretend you're done. The political engagement happens before, and actually certainly after. Before, because you're lobbying, you're educating yourself, educating your community, mobilizing the community, and joining other partnerships, and then voting for the right candidates. And then voting happens because it's about grading these politicians. Did they meet the grade or not? And then after they're elected, you want to engage them to get the policies through, to push them. Because the reality is, squeaky wheel gets the oil. That's what it is. The ones who are loudest, the one who meet the most, visit the most, bring their issues the most. And I don't want to talk in ideal ways, because politicians are driven by more than that. There's interest. The re-election interest happens. They say the first thing, you talk to politicians, you talk to members of Congress, and they say the first thing you do when you are elected, when you take seat, you go to your office in Congress, the first thing you do is you call your 50 or 100 top donors to thank them for your support. The very first thing, because you want to thank them. Say, hey, it's because of you that I'm here. Thank you. I always keep you in mind. The point is, it's a combination. I don't want to be idealistic. I also don't want to be too cynical. It's a combination that goes up and down depending on the person. There are some values, some principle for some. There are some self-driven values. Some members of Congress, some elected officials are driven by their own values. But also there's an impact of, I want to get elected. So that's why truly engagement is crucial.
And Hussam, okay, so And I have seen this, and I think you might have. I was looking into your Twitter today. I do follow you, by the way, and what happened is that I think you retweeted an article that was celebrating of the political engagement of the Muslim and Arab community in the state of Michigan. And if this happened to be the state that is won by the Democrats, and it was talking about how the involvement of the Muslim community potentially made a difference in Michigan. So I have two questions for you. If that is the case, is this something to be, for a lack of a better word, boasting about? Should we be concerned about potential backlash against the community to say, look, it was their vote that gave Michigan to Biden? And assuming that, you know what, if Biden wins Michigan and it was attributed to the involvement of the Muslim community. That is the first question. And the second question that is, with all what we are seeing, that sense of once the elections are over, so how do you keep the momentum going of wanting the community to continue to participate at that level?
Excellent. First part, it's okay to boast, especially if it is true. Obviously, it is not fully true in a sense. Every other community can make that claim, right? African Americans can say that without our votes, Biden would not have won. Latinos can make that claim, and everybody else, workers, unions, etc. So it is true. No one community can make all the difference, but every community makes some difference, right? It takes drop after drop to cause the flood. So what it is, we were in this case, because the American Muslim community was engaged by the Biden campaign, and it did make a difference. It showed. And by the way, more people in Michigan voted for Trump this year than in 2016, because he also engaged the Arab and the Muslim community. So there was, that to be said. And that is to be said because the community is diverse. I mean, personally, I would say we were extremely offended and traumatized by many of the policies of Trump and his administration. But nevertheless, there are people in our community who might be fiscally conservative, who might be socially conservative, who might, who some of the agenda or the platform of Trump might have appealed to them. And we need to obviously find out what happened and maybe help the community work on its priorities in terms of human rights being first before my own financial interest. So back to your question, yes, it is okay. There might be some backlash. But the reality is it is important for two reasons. One, we want the community to know that don't take your vote for granted. You count. Don't say, I hear from so many people, I'm just another vote. It's not going to make a difference. We saw some states are being lost until recently. Now the numbers have changed a little bit. But until a few hours ago, Nevada was shifting from one side to the other, from usually, or what was expected by Republicans to be a red maybe shift, it actually is blue because of 8,000 votes. I can tell you there are more than 8,000 Muslims that I know of probably in Reno, let alone Las Vegas. So it makes a difference. Your vote counts. The number two reason is because we want elected officials not to take our votes for granted. So now they need to know, they need to work for our votes, and they need to fulfill the promises they make in this case. And that is why I think it is time for us to celebrate. Yes, it is okay to celebrate that this year we shined as a community. CARE conducted a survey right after the election we called registered Muslim voters, about 1,000 of them nationwide, randomly. And we found out that 84% of Muslims who are registered said they actually voted this election. And now here are the numbers. 69% said they voted for Biden, and 17% said they voted for Trump. About 11% declined to declare. I think they voted for Trump, but they were too embarrassed to say it. But who knows? And 3% voted for other people, other candidates. So, alhamdulillah, we see a large number. We see engagement. Of course, I also want to say that, to your second part of the question, or second question, is that how important is this engagement? Let's face it. Number one, assuming that Trump is no longer going to be the president after end of this year, after inauguration, He still has 2 months. Only Allah knows what he can do in 2 months. We've seen him cause almost World War III in one day. So we know he's going to be pushing. Allah knows what, on racism, on injustice, on immigration, on Supreme Court. Who knows? He can convince one of the elderly Supreme Court judges or justices to resign, maybe, and then he might appoint somebody else. Who knows? 2 months he can do a lot. The other things to keep in mind is Joe Biden is not Bernie Sanders. For those of us who are hoping for 180 degrees, in terms of immigration, civil rights, racism, the unfortunate relationship with love affair that we have with dictatorships, with Modi, with Netanyahu, that's not going to change 180 degrees. We're going to have to put a lot of work. Our work has just started now. The real work has started now. We need to start talking to the administration. We need to start ensuring that the administration includes people from our community who represents the values of our community, so we can push for these issues. And last but not least, why do we need to keep engaging? Think about it. After 4 years of Trump rule and government, the damage, the rift are so deep in this country and around the world. The racial tension that exists in the country, the mistreatment of immigrants, no more refugees coming here, the separation of children from their parents, placing children in cages. I'm talking about the asylum seekers at our border. The tension, the political tension that exists in the world. His relationship with Modi and when he associates with Modi, with Netanyahu, with MBS, with MBZ, with Sisi, he gives them a carte blanche to commit all these crimes, basically saying, you have my protection, you have my support, go ahead and do it. And we've seen them do it. So that's why our engagement is going to be even more crucial now. At least now we have a chance, somebody who can hear us, as opposed to now, which has an administration which has completely shut down the doors in our face. Oh, I see Salam joining us, mashallah.
Assalamu alaikum. We're taking the show on the road now.
I know, we should do that probably. The Salam and Hussam.
Yeah.
By the way, they were both, I think, were you on Shura TV? I think you were discussing a similar topic, I believe.
Yeah,
not to watch
exactly what we were discussing yesterday. Exactly.
Yeah. So do me a favor, Salam. And Salam, thank you for coming on and good to have you. Good to have you back. And we're talking about, what's next. But then, Hussam, you're talking about all these policies and the damage that's been done by this administration. Over 60 million people voted for Trump. I mean, we're not, and I believe, I also heard that I think Trump has acquired more votes than President Obama. Did I hear that right? Even though this election may not be going his way, but nevertheless, we're talking about more people voting for President Trump than they did President Obama. Now that's very telling. When we look into something like this, I mean, what is that telling us?
I think what it's telling us is that we don't really understand what's happening. I think part of it is white nationalism, white supremacy, but I don't think that's all of it. I mean, when I see Muslims supporting Trump at maybe 20%, let's say, African Americans about the same, Latinos in certain spots. So there's country that we do not really understand that is a driver for this. And I also think that even if Trump loses, and it looks like he's going to lose, let's say he does lose, the problem is still there. And the people who voted for Trump, by the way, were the ones who voted for Obama. There are people who voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012, and they shifted to Trump. So there's so many things that we need to sit down and think and analyze and study and read up on before we can just immediately say, oh, these guys are going to ruin the country and they're a danger to the country and they're this and that. And we find ourselves, we're a minority. We find ourselves in an uphill battle. So we need some serious thinking and a serious study on this phenomenon because it is not going away.
Got it. Hussam, you said two things before Salam joined us. You spoke about the idea of holding politicians accountable to the promises that they made to the community. What kind of promises politicians? What kind of promises did they make to the community? That is number one.
Well, they make all sorts of promises to get your votes, like any car salesman. And it's up to us to, first of all, sift through what is real, what is not real, what is, campaign talk. And there's always campaign talk. They'll promise you the moon. But also our demands should be realistic, knowing who this candidate is, what their abilities might be, etc. So in this case, with the Biden administration or the Biden campaign, which is probably going to be president-elect very soon, I would say some of the promises that I think are reasonable to expect and we should hold them accountable to. First is revoking the Muslim ban or the Muslim and African ban. That's very reasonable. He promised to make that one of his very first actions, similar to the way, the other way, the opposite way that Trump made that one of his very first executive orders. That is very easy. The promise of inclusion, the inclusivity of the diversity, the beautiful diversity of what America represents. Unfortunately, we only saw one color, literally, with the Trump administration for the most part. Now we hope a Biden administration will go back to what previous governments have done, and that is show, and not in a token way, not in tokenism, but actually people who can really contribute with their thoughts and experience, and that should be from all walks of life, not just American Muslims we're talking about. So we hope to see this. The inclusion of America's diversity, that is definitely expected. Engagement, an open door policy where they would engage with the Muslim community, not pick and choose, not pit us against, good Muslims versus bad Muslims. And, usually the bad Muslims are the ones who are critical of Israel. And suddenly you become a persona non grata in the White House. That should not be accepted, not by the Muslim community and not by our allies. Muslims have something to offer, and you might not always agree with us. That's okay, because maybe you have your own biases, your own misinformation, whatever it is. But we have to have access to engage and be heard in a sincere way. So that open policy is something they've promised to do. Other promises that are made not just to the Muslim community, but to others, but are on issues that are important to us. Something to do with dealing with the racial tension that exists today in America. The fueling of anti-Black racism and other form of racism that we saw from the previous administration. This administration, I'm very hopeful it will live up to it, because it's a commitment made not just to Muslims. On civil rights issues, the association between national security and Islamophobia, that is an issue we are experts, we know how to address it, how to tackle it. We have many good organizations and experts in the community. Through organizations and academically, and alhamdulillah, we have elected officials who can help with that. So these are some of the issues. Obviously, I don't want to talk more. I'm sure there are many others. There's the foreign affairs issue. That's a whole different thing. I mean, Biden has made a promise to hold our quote unquote allies, from Sisi to Netanyahu to Modi to others, accountable for their actions that violate human rights, that promote anti-democratic movements and actions in many countries around the world. So these are some of the promises that I hope the Biden administration would be held accountable to fulfill.
Nice, well said. Salam, so when we started, as we were waiting there, Hussam was talking about what is next. And we were talking about this idea of people somehow, the end of an election is the end of their involvement until the second round of elections come back again. So now that the elections are over, and like you both are alluding to it, it seems like it's going to go, towards Biden. What is next? Is that it? Is it over? Job mission accomplished. Yeah. Trump is out. Is that it for us?
No. Yeah. The way we look at it, Yasir and
I'm sorry. We as in Impact. You mean?
Impact. Yeah.
Okay.
Is that our work begins after the election?
Okay.
Right. Everybody's into the horse race and fundraising and whatever, and quite frankly, we can't compete with the dollars, the billions of dollars that are spent on these races. We, however, do strategic and smart things by saying, okay, we can make an impact in Michigan. Let's put our resources there. We can make an impact in Georgia. Let's put some resources there. Even Florida, Arizona. So Muslim organizations were having town halls in all these swing states and making phone calls and texting at the Million Muslim Vote campaign. So we were at least recognized. At ISNA, we have 3 presidential candidates come courting the Muslim vote. Never happened before. So alhamdulillah, I mean, we should recognize the good work that we as American Muslims have done to gain that recognition, because now work starts after the election. The advocacy for the agenda, exactly what Hussam was talking about, civil rights. Biden has promised that on the in the first days of his administration, he will rescind the Muslim ban. Okay, well, let's make sure he does it. After that, he said he's going to work on ending systemic racism in our country. All right, let's put our people to advocate for that. And then in terms of human rights, we feel that he's going to be tested, because obviously we're not the only people in Washington. He will be tested by Putin, by Netanyahu, by Modi, by Xi in China. They will test Biden, and we have to be there and be ready. Because remember what happened when Obama was elected in 2008? Do you know what the first thing that happened? Netanyahu started bombing Gaza to test how pro-Israel Obama was going to be at that time. So we need to anticipate these issues and be ready for them. So as not to say, oh, Biden has sold, he's betrayed us, and because at the end of the day, there are so many other forces that we have to deal with, and we have to be very, very strategic, and we have to be part of some powerful coalitions to get this message across. The good thing is, the landscape has changed just in the last year or two. So I think we have more opportunities for our community.
So Salam, when you speak, and Hussam, you also speak about that, say that let's hold him accountable. Let's make sure that he does that. I think that's your exact quote, what you said, Salam. Let's make sure that he does what he promised. When you speak about the us, and how do you ensure something like this? I mean, who is after, let's say Biden is the next president now, who is going to be representing us in making sure that Biden follows up with his promise? I mean, is this the job of CARE and Impact? And I'm just, how does that work?
I think it's all about, it's exactly what you said. Who is going to be in these positions of power? Who is going to be the Assistant Secretary of State, the Deputy Secretary of State, the National Security Council team? And we will be involved. Impact, CARE, Engage, all these Muslim organizations will be involved, starting when the election is certified, and Biden, if it looks like, and as it looks, he will be declared the winner. They will have the transition team, and there are important people that we need to be talking to. Anthony Blinken, for example, is going to be a major part of his transition team. There are people in Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, major part of his transition team. These are the people we need to engage to make sure there are Muslims in positions of authority that will be involved in the policy discussions within the administration. So that's the first phase between now and January 21st. After January 21st, then we start talking about the issues.
Okay. So Hussam, what is if I can say, what is CARE's plan in engaging the administration? And I'm sorry, but I must ask this question. There is also theoretically a possibility that Trump might actually be re-elected. Does that also include Trump as well, and his administration that is coming? Because to me, I'm listening to this, I'm saying, well, it seems like all of our hopes are just going to be with Biden, and then what happens if Trump ends up, winning, at least in theory? So Hussam, what is CARE's plan? And
sure, let's deal with the first part of the question. I mean, the first element of what if Trump wins? I mean, through a lawsuit, through something, right? Things could happen, and if that happens, we just have to prepare ourselves for another 4 years of increased, Islamophobia, tension. So everything we've seen now, just multiply it by God knows how much multiple times, because he has no reason to worry. But I have to say, I'm not worried about that. If it happens, I think we as a community today, alhamdulillah, we're way better positioned to continue this fight as we've been doing for the last 4 years with resilience as a community. We have the organizations, we have the experts, we have the allies, we have the resolve, alhamdulillah. People thought we will shy away from our rights. Actually, if anything, what I saw over the last 4 years, mashallah, is a brave community, principled community. We got deeper and wider. We got deeper in rooted. We have, mashallah, who would have imagined? As a result, I mean, maybe indirectly, as a result of Trump's Islamophobia and bigotry, we have two new members of Congress, two ladies, stronger than anybody I've seen before. Ilhan Omar Rashida Tlaib, may Allah bless them, who stood up against his policies and against his hatred. So and then the list goes on and on. We have more elected officials today, not as a result of Biden possibly getting elected, but as a community reacting to hate by saying, you know what, we're not going to allow for anyone to dictate fear on us. So we have more people running at a local level, state level, federal level now than ever. Alhamdulillah, so many races to celebrate around the country. So if he continues, there will be more of that reorganizing, alliances, partnership building, fighting back in court, in media, in policies, in Congress, whatever it takes to provide some checks and balances and push back. Alhamdulillah, I'm not worried about that. But most likely it's not going to happen. Most likely it's going to be a Biden. And what do we need to do is, building on what Salam said, which was very correct, assuming after inauguration, actually the work before inauguration, as they're developing the cabinet and the team, is a whole different type of work where anybody who has contact to the transition team should push for the right people to be there, not just from within the Muslim community, but everywhere else. After inauguration, once they start their job at the White House, the engagement is everybody's job. We delegate some of the work to organizations. Mashallah, when it comes to policy, Impact takes a major lead on this one, analyzing, pushing, writing, and helping, depicting and presenting our perspective and our values in forms of laws. Alhamdulillah, and it gets read and valued by elected officials. CARE can mobilize the Muslim community, can take the grassroots to meet and advocate and push for these policies, file for lawsuits when necessary. We have other organizations that can educate the youth. Others can build the conventions, the annual conventions, ICNA, ISNA, MAS, where we get the chance to have these conversations and invite. Everybody has a role, and of course, I don't want to sound like everybody has a separate role. A lot of the work intertwined a lot of times, but everybody has a role. From the activists, what is not acceptable. Let me start by that. What is not acceptable is for somebody to say, "There's not much for me to do. Go ahead, guys, and fight it." You have a role. Voting is not one of them. It's a given. It's not even a debate. Everybody should vote. We're done deal. Now the real work happens after that. So don't tell me I'm done. It's not enough. The engagement. Hosting a member of Congress or a city council person at your home, visiting, going to the city council meeting and pushing for an issue, writing when there's an action alert coming from CARE or ACLU or anybody else, complaining, protesting when necessary. So they are participating in a lot of these advocacy days that happen throughout the year, locally and statewide and federally. So everybody has a role, and that's how we get the attention. And let's not forget, last but not least in this issue, we all have connections. If you're a Latino Muslim, you have contact to the Latino community. If you are an African American Muslim, you have contact within the African American community. Bring them in so we can strengthen the partnership and our alliance with them, so we can help each other's causes, because we're not that different from each other. We have common goals and common aspirations, and that's how we multiply and leverage. We're a small number. We're less than 2% in the country. We're not going to change the world. We're not going to turn injustice to justice by ourselves. And we're not the only ones who care about justice. So we need to build وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and collaborate with one another on issues of piety and goodness.
Salam, what's your take on that?
No, I agree. And you know, the way you asked the question, the answer is, it's not about who's in the White House necessarily. It's about us. How are we prepared to deal with the issues that impact the society, to bring about justice, equity, to have transparency, to have people have confidence in our government institutions as a part of democracy, to ensure there's a peaceful transition of power. These are the issues that we all should be involved in. Number two, the one issue that we should really keep in mind is the issue of white supremacist violence, targeting our institutions and other institutions. So even, you know, if Trump wins or loses, there's going to be reaction by the white militia, and MPAC will make that one of its primary issues in 2021, i.e. the protection of our mosques and our schools and our organizations from this threat. So these are the issues we should be working on, along with the foreign policy issues that I'm sure we will have to deal with. And you know, again, if Biden wins, it's not like AIPAC is going to, you know, sit down and say, oh well, you know, Biden won, or the religious nationalists of the Indian government and their supporters here, or China or Russia. No, we will have to deal with the same issues, because these are unfortunately powerful groups, and we need to come up with a strategy in dealing with these issues for the next 4 years and beyond.
Salam, I'm sorry, I have to cut you off, but for the sake of transparency, almost every group that you mentioned has a backing of a country out there, be it in the form of India, AIPAC, or any of these groups, or China or Russia that you've mentioned.
Right.
Within the Muslim community, it seems like, as far as, and I really don't know how to phrase this, but it seems like, you know, Hussam made a couple of references to MBS, MBZ, and CC, meaning that they were, you know, as I think President Trump called one of them my favorite dictator. So it's very. So what is it that we're bringing in? Where is?
Okay, listen.
What is it that we bring in?
Number one, I agree with your premise. We do not have a government that is really representing the interests of Muslims anywhere. And we can discuss certain governments that people like and don't like, but definitely in the Middle East there is no, you know, there's no favorite there, right? They all are terrible, and some are more ruthless than others. But as American Muslims, when you think about, if we have 6 million, we generate as much collective economic worth in our community as American Muslims than any Muslim country. So we have the power within the American Muslim community if we acknowledge that we have that power. And look to the Zionist movement before the creation of Israel. They had to organize from the grassroots. The Civil Rights Movement, the Mormon movement, the Catholic movement, all these movements had no power. It was later on that they organized to develop their own power. And I think American Muslims have to do that. Now, what we have to consider then, you know, as the country, as you know, the vice president said today, he is working to unite and heal the country, or he said yesterday, unite and heal the country. We Muslims have to be a part of that. And we have to start with ourselves. We have to stop the infighting between Muslim organizations. The Quran says, if you do not band together, the other side is banding together, corruption and oppression will go unchecked. So we have to band together and put aside our differences first. Then I think we will recognize more influence in the situation, more potential power for ourselves. Because there's no one Muslim organization that has any power. We're nothing. We have to coalesce. We have to.
And I think that your presence along with Hussam here is very telling, and that is and especially the language that both of you use towards each other's organizations. It sounds like what we're having is that not a competition, but rather a position of complementing each other, despite the the variety of the different types of activities that both organizations
we are additive, not competitive. And
well
we
said.
compete. No, and let me be very clear. Of course, we're going to compete for the money from the community, but we should do it in an ethical way, not putting each other down, not spewing suspicion, things like that. And not to say that we do that. I think MPAC and CARE have a really strong relationship, but there's too much of that going around with in various situations. We really need to put that aside and be additive, not competitive on these issues.
Hussam, what is the absence of a Muslim government that holds the interest of the Muslim community a priority to them? What does that do to us here locally?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say Salam and I go a long way, and we work very well together. Although he's way more athletic than me, I don't know if he's still playing basketball. I feel embarrassed every time he talks about it. Basketball playing.
I think you're in good shape. You look like you're in good shape, Hussam.
You don't see anything below here, so good.
I just turned. I think you guys need to call me Ammu. I just turned 60.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
MashaAllah.
If we get there, you're gonna be calling me Jiddo. You know I'm a Jiddo now. So let's keep it Salam and Hussam. No titles.
You definitely won that. Okay, I give you that.
So back to your question, Sheikh Yasir. I would say it's a very complicated issue. I want to say that because we are a community that is very diverse, unlike other communities. When you talk about Hindu nationalist community, they're all from India. They're not from Saudi Arabia. If you talk about pro-Israelis, they are usually people who have some connection to Israel. For us, when we stand for universal values of equality, justice, but also we want to see democracy and human rights in places where we have our brothers and sisters of the Ummah, not just, the Muslim community around the world, the Muslim Ummah. I'm not from Eritrea, I'm not from Ethiopia, I'm not from Egypt, but I want to see peace and justice and prosperity and human rights in that part of the world. And the list goes on, from Iraq to Afghanistan to Syria and so on. We can't, as Muslims, we have that affinity. Alhamdulillah, this is what we wish for every human being. This is what mercy to mankind means to us. We would love to see it for everybody, including to Jews and Hindus in India and Israel, respectively. So it's not something we claim. We want to see people live in peace and dignity, as long as they also allow for peace and dignity for other people. Now, in addition to that, there's another layer. We're human beings. We have our attachment to places where our parents come from, uniquely. And, the Prophet, his love for Mecca was very unique because it's a holy city, sacred city, but also it was his place of birth, his place where he grew up. He said, when he was leaving with his tears, you are the most beloved of Allah's land to my heart and to me. Had it not been for your people pushing me out, I would never leave you. So also being a diverse community that includes many who are immigrants or maybe of immigrant backgrounds, there are some interests in certain areas: Syria, Iraq, Kashmir, Burma, East Turkestan, Egypt, and Libya, and so on and so forth. So there are these two elements. One is our interest in seeing peace and prosperity in where our brothers and sisters live, and sometimes uniquely we are driven by that. So with that, there is no shame. I want to make sure that, and no one is calling here, not you, not me, not Salam, is saying that, we distance, we're American Muslims, we don't have a government. It's one thing to, I'm a big critic of the regimes in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in UAE, in Egypt. But no one is dearer to my heart than these brothers and sisters who live there. The Iranian people, the Egyptian people, the Syrian people, the Saudi people. I have no problem. I want to see them as prosperous as we are, as thriving as we are, enjoying democracy, human rights. So the way I'm saying that is, we can make that difference. Number one, in places where the misery is because it's a U.S. interest, fake interest, because it's being pushed by interest groups, because of lobbyists, because of weapons industry, this oil companies, etc., who are pushing for instability in that region. That's why they install and support dictatorship. We have a way to push back on that one. In areas where it's not the US directly involved, but the US absence is causing it, we can also push the US to be an element for peace and justice in that world. So neutrality in face of genocide is not acceptable. As we see in East Turkestan today, where 2 to 3 million Uyghur Muslims being placed in concentration camps, and God knows all the horrific things happening. The US, yes, Trump keeps talking about it, but nothing hasn't been done. The US can take a lead and lead European countries, Muslim countries, and other countries to put pressure and sanctions on China and so on. So there's so much that we can do, but none of that could happen until we stand on our feet. And of course, it doesn't mean we don't do anything for the next few years, but I'm saying a priority for us is to strengthen our presence, our political influence, our unity, so we can help those in need around the world, including those who are our brothers and sisters in Muslim majority countries, who are either undermined by US unjust policies in that region, or by US absence from good policies in that region.
Nice. So do me a favor, for both of you, we're running out of time, but I would like to spend the rest of the time addressing two questions. Number one is the number of Muslims who have been elected in this time. What does that mean to us, and what's your read, and any surprises? I know somebody got elected in Oklahoma. Oklahoma is a very, very red state. So to see a Muslim, and if I'm correct, they also happen to be African Americans, being elected in that part of the state, to me, that was telling. So any surprises there for you, and what does that tell us?
Well, I think what it tells us is that we are becoming an integral part of American pluralism, and that is a very positive step to show Islam as enriching, as integral, as something that will help people transform themselves from darkness to light. When you have Muslims working in public service, that is the best form. And I believe that the Muslims working in the local positions and the state positions can do much more than those in the Congress. I mean, I love Rashida and Ilhan and Andre Carson, but I remember Keith Ellison told us, I could do more things in the state of Minnesota than I ever did in the Congress, because in the Congress, you're one of 435. It's very political, very hierarchical. And so it's very difficult to get anything done. So you're basically issuing statements every day and attending hearings. So these officials who are elected in the state legislature, very important. You know what the most important thing about the state legislature is? Not the most, but one of the most. They determine the voting districts. And you know how we always complain about gerrymandering? Well, it is the state legislatures that determine these voting districts. They're the ones who are determining what's happening with school textbooks, the way we're teaching history to our children. So the more we can get engaged at the state and local levels, I think the better it is for us. Yes, there's the White House. That's always in the news. But really, really, unless we get our act together locally, we're never going to even reach the level of influence that we want nationally. So I see this as a very positive sign, and I'm pleasantly surprised how many Muslims have been elected. But also, don't forget how many American Muslims are staff members of these officials. There are probably many more than we can count. So let us help organize these people as they're engaging the governors and the attorney generals throughout the states. I think there's a treasure there. So I'm very pleasantly surprised by how many we've seen at that level.
Nice. Hussam, what about you? Getting lots of WhatsApp images. Somebody put all of them in one big post.
Yeah, we're all doing that. We're all taking credit for something we didn't do, by the way.
Too many to fit in one poster, anyway.
Actually, yeah. So what's your take on that, Hussam?
Yeah, couple of things. one is one of the answers would relate to your question. Another one is a marginal one. I would say first, I'm pleasantly surprised. Alhamdulillah, it brings me joy, a pleasure to know that American Muslims are contributing, serving. This is public service, as Salam said. This is what it is. You know, you don't do it for glory. You don't. I mean, it's a lot of headache, and most people go in with good intentions to serve, to bring their values into this service. You know, the values of justice and mercy and kindness and generosity. They put it into their service, and we've seen it. MashaAllah, the hard work of people like Keith Ellison and Andre Carson and Rashida and Ilhan, and locally. People like Farah Khan and you know, and many other states. I don't want to go over the list. Somebody will feel excluded. Now, the good thing is, what does it mean? It means, you know, because we always talk about white supremacists and racism and Islamophobia. It is there. Nobody can deny it. It should not be ever underestimated. But also, most people in America have no problem with Muslims, because none of these candidates, by the way, ran as a Muslim candidate. No one said, hey, here's my flag, I'm a Muslim, vote for me. All of them ran as good candidates who happened to be Muslim. Basically, they were not embarrassed. No, very few of them that I know of hid their Islam. Actually, everyone that I know proudly said who they are: immigrant, Palestinian, Pakistani, Arab, Persian, Muslim. You know, everybody talked about their sub-identity, but talked about what they're going to do when they're elected, how they're going to serve the district, and people trusted them. You know, when we talk about Rashida, where, you know, when people think Rashida, every time tells me, oh yeah, you know, it's Dearborn. No, Rashida's district is not where the Arabs live. The overwhelming majority of people in her district are actually African Americans.
Right.
And
she ran against an African American.
Exactly. Her opponent was a deeply rooted African American, somebody who's in the community. But yet her district, the people in her district, the constituents, trusted her because of what she brings. What she brought in more services, more money, federal money to the district than anybody else before. So the point is, don't hesitate. If others are listening today and thinking, well, I have an accent. Well, I'm too dark. Hey, I'm too hairy. Well, you know, my name is foreign sounding, quote unquote, whatever that means. You know, people. I'm saying that because I heard that from people. I've told them, you should run. Man, you're a great person. You're a great speaker. I said, well, I sound like this. No, look, I've seen people of all of these backgrounds running and gaining support. And if you don't win the first time, do it the second time. So basically, alhamdulillah, we have enough people in America who trust the goodness and the service that American Muslims can offer. The second point that is a little bit relevant, we're going to look at the list now. And I want the Muslim community. I know some people would be very upset with me now. I don't play identity politics. Not everybody who says I'm a Muslim when they need be, you know, we should celebrate. But also the cancel culture also has to, you know, be addressed in the community.
Yeah.
We are diverse. We are a diverse community. Alhamdulillah ta'ala, the three of us here, inshallah, and Allah knows best, pray 5 times a day. We fast Ramadan. We take Islam seriously. We raise our children. We take them, you know, teach them Quran. But not everybody is that way. I wish everybody is that way. Every Muslim is that way. But alhamdulillah, you know, we even within our own families, we know people who are different, people who are better than us. We see them, at least in appearance. People who are, inshallah, on the way to being more practicing, people who chose the. What I'm saying is, this is not the time to make enemies. If X is not your favorite candidate, there's no need to bash them. There's no to say, well, where is her hijab? Oh, he doesn't have a beard. You know what? He lived in the city. I never saw them in the masjid. I heard these things about candidates. That is hurtful. That is hurtful. That's number one. That is not good da'wah. That is never a good da'wah way. If that's how you think, by putting people down, that is being judgmental. That you can advise. You can say, inshallah, we want to. And if you feel those who are running for office are not where you want them to be, advise them. And if they don't listen to you, train and field others who will run in other places who you feel represent your values closer. But in the meanwhile, look at the overall goodness of people. Again, I'm not saying every Muslim. Trust me. If Zuhdi, you know, Uncle Zuhdi Jasser runs for office, I will oppose him all the way. I don't care if he prays 5 times a day, right? Because it's about values, about principles, especially universal values. But if a person who claims to be Muslim runs, and they might not pray 5 times a day, but they stand for justice, against racism, for equality, I'm gonna make da'wah, I'm gonna make dua for them. May Allah guide them to pray 5 times a day. But I'm gonna support them today when they run against an Islamophobe in their district, because we're hiring them for a different role. I'm not hiring them as my imam or my Quran teacher. For my Quran teacher, I'm gonna look for Sheikh Yasir, right? But for someone to run a city, I'm gonna look at the person who's honest, who has integrity, who's careful about ethics, who brings people together, and so on and so forth. And I think the Muslim community is going through a struggle today. I understand it. It's coming from a good place. But it's leading to wrong actions. It's leading to cancel attitude and culture and bashing people who are working hard. What I've heard about people like Sister Ilhan and Rashida and other people breaks my heart. It's not easy to run for office, and it's not easy to be the target of Islamophobia. And then here we are, some in our community come and undermine them. It's not acceptable.
Well said. I think I'm sorry. The surprise for me was Medina Wilson Anton, African American from Delaware, into the state legislation. She's hijabi with a foreign sounding name, and despite what is going on, yet she was elected there. Salam, we have about 5 minutes left, and you brought up this topic, and I really wish that we can address this in like 2 minutes each. I would hate to scare our community, but you brought it up, and rightly so. The potential backlash of white supremacy. Now that this administration has normalized jerk, what do we do? Should we be concerned, and what needs to be done, if we can do that in 2 minutes?
Sure. Well, I mean, yes, we should be concerned, but the objective of that group is to intimidate us and scare us away. So we have to stand tall and be ready. I think that, there are, and I think both CARE and MPAC have done security assessments of their buildings, and we've gotten funds from the government to enhance security. There should be more mosques doing that. And if you need help, you can call MPAC or CARE for help in enhancing your security. There should be measures that we take, and security. If you go to a synagogue, they do some of the best security measures around, and we should learn their best practices, learn from our Jewish brothers and sisters, and develop the same measures in our mosque. I remember going to Minneapolis, and there was a mosque that was firebombed by a white militia called the White Rabbits. And when we went to talk to the people there, I was able to walk into that building. Nobody was there. And I walked into a classroom and I asked, where is the head of the building? Who's responsible? And they pointed me back to the front. That should not happen these days. It should never, ever happen in our. So there are things that we can do. And also it's not about physical security only. It's about human security. It's about creating the relationships with our legislators, with local law enforcement, with our interfaith allies, to create that human chain so that people understand that we're not standing alone. They want to see us alone. They want to see us in isolation. So there are so many things we should do and be ready. But remember, they're trying, just like in the elections, they tried to scare us away from voting. They're going to continue doing that. That's their only tactic. And we need to stand tall, stand together. And as Hussam said, the talk about Ilhan and Rashida, we should end it. We should coalesce, band together, put aside these differences, or talk about them behind closed doors, but don't let them drag us down. I think they want to see us fighting each other. We should defy that as well.
Sam, today, you spoke about what was earlier called political literacy. How would you assess that within our Muslim community? Where would you say we stand as far as that's concerned? Again, in a minute.
Yeah, not much. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Unfortunately, there's a lot of goodwill, good intentions. There are a lot of that in the community. There's a lot of trust, but we're going through a transition today where, before it was us versus them. There were the politicians and us as a community. Today we have Muslims in in politics at very levels, staffing, volunteering, organizations, and elected positions. That is creating some kind of soul searching within the community. Where do we draw the line? There are areas where we should draw the line. I'm not saying there are no lines. There are areas where we can hold our ground and say, that's not my cup of tea. Good luck for you, but I'm gonna skip. It's okay. But what is worth a fight? What is worth a division? What is worth is where we have to learn that. With other communities, they've kind of mastered that. We're not there. We get emotional very quickly. We get passionate very quickly. And immediately, it's for us, sometimes it becomes a zero-sum game. And it's very dangerous, very detrimental to any community because no one will take us seriously. Because I can tell you, I know elected officials now, candidates, who did not want to come to the Muslim community because they were afraid, they will be put at a higher standard where they can never meet. They said, so we don't need to make it impossible. We have to come to people where they're at and inshallah move them up in the ladder. But we can't keep putting people at a level where they have to meet a minimum standard that is short of perfection. So the literacy is lack of experience, not much. I think, alhamdulillah, as we start hearing, we need more of our elected, our scholar-based imams, alims, shuyukh, to get a little bit more engaged and help the community learn this pragmatism that is principle-based. I'm not into open-ended pragmatism, but I think many in our community are very rigid, and it's making it hard for them to get a little bit deeper in politics. And I think this is where your role, Sheikh Yasir, because I think we were talking to Salam and Hussam, but I think there's a role of our scholars and our imams that is extremely crucial, and that is to instill, and I know you've been doing that, and many others have been doing that, teaching our community to be practical. As we follow the Sunnah of Muhammad, he was probably the most principled and practical person in making sure that we don't lose focus of the end goal. The end goal is bringing people some ease, freedom to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, etc., not to be bogged down on the minute things sometimes.
Beautiful. Hussam and Salam, man, having a conversation with you is always beautiful, and time passes by so unbelievably quickly. I was hoping that by tonight we would know who the president is, but unfortunately we do not know that yet, even though there are some indication. So I want you to promise me that when we know who the president is, that you all will come back again, inshallah.
Oh yeah, anytime.
Oh,
Anytime.
a pleasure.
And to all of our viewers, on your behalf, I just want to thank our two lovely guests here, Hussam Ayloush, Executive Director of CARE California, and Salam Al-Mayati, Executive Director of Impact Muslim Public Affairs Council. Both of them are out of Los Angeles. Thank you for joining us, and inshallah we will see you at the same time next week. Until then, we say so long, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.